Hello and welcome to another tutorial from Zeta. Um, Today we're going to be going over a new photo editing or retouching technique called frequency separation. It's actually been out for a little while now, it's for the last, well, I'd say year and a half. It is actually used and adopted by a lot of studios these days. In the past we used to use dodge burns and your brush quite extensively, but nowadays we've actually, with the advent of science and what have you, they've actually incorporated different techniques to actually use or separate the skin tones and the textures. So basically, frequency separation is all about your keeping or retaining the textures. As I'll zoom into this particular image, this is the image we'll be working on today. So as you notice, this is completely untouched, and you'll notice that if I zoom in even some more, particularly around these regions here, that we actually need to keep some of this information or retain some of these textures. And also you'll notice things like this where the tonality or the tone between different parts of the skin is it changes, so we need to kind of fix that, but also most importantly keeping the texture. The idea of this technique is to keep the texture. I've actually gone ahead and completed the actual procedure, or the frequency separation, to demonstrate the before and after. So this is the before shots, as you see around the neck region, the shadows, the highlights and shadows, they're all still there. We still need to keep all this. So by keeping or retaining the texture, it'll look more realistic in the end. So I'll just zoom out a little. So this is the before, and this folder here, FS or frequency separation, excuse me, will contain the it's only a handful of layers. This dodge and burn we'll get to a little bit later. This is just to demonstrate what we call a non-destructive method for dodging and burning, and I'll also demonstrate that too. So frequency separation off, and when we switch on, there it is there. So I'll zoom in and I'll demonstrate. As you can see here, the tone of the skin is changed, however the actual texture, the texture on her skin is still actually there. So this is a technique which will allow you to get more realistic results whilst going for that cover shot look. Alright, so I'll switch off this layer here, or this group, and we'll actually commence from the beginning. So the idea behind frequency separation is to separate the tones and texture, as I was saying earlier. And the method whereby we do this is we simply will start off with the main image. Now I'm using a Mac here obviously, and for people who are using a PC you can follow on. I am using Photoshop CC, however as far as I know this will go back as far as CS4 or 3 even, and the only criteria I guess is as long as in the image menu you have apply image, you should be able to do this technique. So let's excuse me, let's start with the main. So we'll have a main image, and I'm going to duplicate this 2 times. Now I will be using a shortcut which is Command J on the Mac or Control J on a PC, or just go right click and duplicate layer. So I'm going to do 2 layers, so you're going to see main copy 1 and copy 2. We'll name the first one low for the low frequency, and high for the high frequency. Now you can name them high frequency or low frequency, but for the purpose of this tutorial we'll be using short terms. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that we switch off the high layer so we can see what's happening on the low. Now we're going to apply a simple Gaussian blur on the low layer. So we're going to go to blur, Gaussian blur. Now the trick behind this is to apply it. No one result is the same. excuse me, we want to use as much Gaussian as we need, however not to go too fast. So you still want to see the actual object. So you know this is an eye as I move down the preview window. Generally the nose is a good way to look at the tones. You want to still be able to identify the region or what it is we're looking at. So if we go say to 48, we can't really make out what's going on here. So generally between 5 to 15 is where you want to be. So this is a bit too much for me. I'm going to say, let's just say 8 is good. So we're going to go 8. Again, on your image, it may differ. So we'll hit OK. So that takes care of our low layer. That's all it is. What this does is, I'll zoom in again, it just smooths out the tones. So although we still need to do some work on it using the our stone clamp and also our spot healing or healing brush, and of course even lassoing and some feathering, and again most importantly the Gaussian blur. There is so many techniques to this, it's really up to you, and you can even do this in a non-destructive method, which I'll also attempt to demonstrate later on. But for the time being, we're gonna just attempt to put a Gaussian blur on the low layer. That is it for now. And now we're going to switch on the high layer. Now this is the tricky part. This is probably as tricky as it's going to get. We'll go to image. We'll click on the image menu, my apology, and then we'll go down to apply image. This is the important one here. Now there's two things we need to remember here. Up here I've opened up a 16-bit file and an 8-bit file. At the moment we're working on the 8-bit file. If you are working on an 8-bit image, the method will differ to if you're working on something that's 16-bit. So 9 times out of 10 I'll work on 8-bit. Now I'm not going to get into the details of the difference between 8-bit and 16-bit channels. It's just merely all about color and how much you can retain and information or color information you may retain. For the purpose of this exercise or tutorial, we're going to stick with the 8-bit channel. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go to your blending mode. You want to change it to add. And from there you also want to make sure your scale is to 2 and your offset is 128. And from here, the layer, most importantly, we need to put low. Now I know I've got a few up here. That's because I have an extra group which I've left in here to show you the difference later on. But we're going to use low. In your file, you're only going to have high, low, and main. So we click on low. And watch this. Nothing happens. We need to put the word invert. So low is the layer, and we're going to select invert. Now, my apologies, something is not right here. Add. Sorry, my apology. We're going to do subtract, and we're not going to do invert. Sorry, I was working earlier on a 16-bit file, hence why my settings were for the 16-bit. If you were working on a 16-bit file, it's the opposite. It'll be add rather than subtract. So 2 and it'll be 0, and then we invert. As you can see there, that's the settings you need for a 16-bit. In this case here, we hit low. It's an 8-bit file, so I'll repeat it. 8-bit is low, subtract 2 for the scale, 128 for the offset, but we don't need invert. We switch that off or toggle that off. Now we're going to hit OK. So layer is low, blending mode is subtract, scale is 2, and offset is 128. As you can see, as I zoom in here, what this has done is almost like an edge selection or a detect edge in your filters, but this is just basically extruding all the textures from the file. So there you are. So what we've done now is we've literally separated the texture and the skin from each other. Now you're probably thinking, well, it doesn't look like much right now, so Well, there is extra one more step we need to apply here. You need to set the high layer and the blending mode, to linear light. Now, as you can see here, and let's just group it. So Control G to group. So I Shift select the two layers, high, low, and then Control G or Command G if you're on a Mac. Now I'm going to switch this on and off, or toggle this on and off. All that work, and it says nothing has happened. You're asking yourself, well, this is the beauty of frequency separation. It allows us now to independently work on the low, or the tonality of the skin, and the high, or the actual texture of the skin. So let's just start here by switching off the high, and we're gonna kind of start blending. Now I can work with it on or off. I like to leave both the layers on. I've seen people work with them independently, and they're quite comfortable with that. For this tutorial, we're gonna always leave the high and low both on. So I'm going to zoom into a region, and you don't have to be too careful with this. This is the beauty of frequency separation. We're going to select our lasso tool with it, with L for shortcut L, or just selecting it. And I'm going to select a region on the face. You're going to hit Q for quick mask. This allows us to make a region, or a feathered region, to see how much of the tone are we actually going to affect. So for the purpose of this tutorial, Q is the quick mask tool, or the shortcut to quick mask. Now you'll use the Q key to toggle on and off. Once you've done that, there's also another step involved here. You need to set your feather up here into a region. Now again, this will be dependent, or the criteria is dependent on the image you are using. Whether it's a 16-bit file or an 8-bit file, it doesn't matter. But what will happen is, if you're using a less megapixel image, in this particular instance, this is I believe an 18 megapixel photo. This is not mine. This is from Google. This is just for the purpose of the tutorial. This is not my photo. She is an actor. And it's just basically, I've Googled her, and I looked up a file that we could use for this tutorial, and this is the best one I could find. So once again, we're going to use the lasso tool, select the region on the face, press the Q, my apologies, lasso, select, Q, lasso, and then I'm going to use the Q key to toggle on and off. Now that's the type of region or feathering you want to go for. You don't want it to be too hard or too soft. So for me, 30 works great. So I'm going to go back, and now what we're going to do here is we're going to do filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Now I've set up a shortcut key for my Gaussian blur on my computer, but you may do the same by going to your edit menu, keyboard shortcuts, and in this case here I've gone to filter, Gaussian blur, just over here, and I've got Command, Option, and period, and that gives me my shortcut to my Gaussian blur. Now I'm going to do Command, Alt, Option, period. 8 to 10 is where you want to be for this particular exercise. Again, for the image you're using, that will vary. So I'm going to press OK, and then not much has happened. So this is a kind of a gauge where I need to go back in there and apply a bit more Gaussian blur. So I'm going to go with 15 and hit OK. Now that's sort of smoothed it out a little bit. Again, in this particular instance, I can go into the clone stamp tool. I will right click, select the soft brush, use the less than bracket, right than bracket shortcut to make it bigger or smaller, and then we can use our Option or Alt on the PC to select different regions we want to sample from. So we can do this and start painting on her face. Now this is something you can do, but I don't like to use this particular option too much, and obviously my fault here. I should be actually down at 5% opacity and 100% flow. That generally works fine, and I can try different regions, and you get the idea that you can go in here and start smoothing the tones, but I much prefer the lasso tool. So I will go in here and I will select my region, and I will use my shortcut key, which is Command Option period, and hit OK. And I'll keep doing this on all the face until I'm happy with all the tones of the skin. So I'll keep applying Gaussian blur, and if I switch off the high layer, you'll notice that you can see if I do this and apply the Gaussian blur, there you are. Hit escape. If I zoom in here, you'll see what I'm talking about. So Command Option period at 15, and there it is. So I'll zoom out a little to so I'll toggle my history. So there. So that's all we're doing. It's ever so slightly, but as you can see, those little blemishes are going. But this is not about the skin texture. This is all about tone. So we'll do the nose. We'll bring up our option 15, or if you're happy to, you can use the healing brush. This is a sampling. I can sample from her nose, but as you can see, it's not the same. You need to, and make sure that whenever you're doing these, whenever you're working on the low and a high layer, that your line sample, or you're sampling from the current layer, not current and below. This is for the old traditional methods, but for the frequency separation, you exclusively need to select current layer. Always check that. You may go back to the stamp tool, and you can do this, or you can go to the lasso tool. Once again, my preference is always the lasso tool. Keep selecting regions. I know this is a little I'm actually repeating myself, but I want you to get the idea of how to do this. I'll switch on the high again, just to show you that not much has happened yet, but as you can see, the tones are starting to fill. So I'm going to go my Q key. I'm happy with that still. So what we can do is we can switch on and off. Now I'm going to show you the before and after. This is still a work in progress, but already we're making headway. If you notice around her cheek, it's starting to soften. Now we are going to lose some highlights, but however, highlights are easy to bring back in. So we'll continue with the low layer. Again, generally under the eyes, under the chin, the forehead, looking for areas where the skin needs. In this particular instance, I can do 30 pixels, and there we are. Top of the eyes. Just over here, and we'll run that. Just around here on the forehead, and we'll run that. Now I think we're at a point where we're almost ready to move on to the high layer. Again, we're only working with tonalities at the moment, but in a second we'll go to the actual texture. The texture needs a little bit more work, but again, there is nothing to this, guys. This is pretty easy. Once you've do it a couple of times, there's actually a classic example. There's a before and after. Before and after. I'm going to go back to the before, and I'm going to reduce this to 10 pixels. Then 20, and you can see the graduation. 20, I think 15 is good for now. Just around the nose region here. I'm only looking for jumps in or if it's subtle, I'll tend to leave it alone. As you can see the skin is starting to look a lot more consistent now, and I'll demonstrate. So I will switch this group off and on. Off. Yes, you're asking yourself a lot. Again, the highlights are getting lost, but we're going to bring this out. We're going to bring these back with that layer I spoke about in the beginning of the tutorial, our non-destructive layer. Again, you can do this non-destructively by working on a separate layer between these two, and you can use the brush tool. You can sample parts of the skin, and I can brush away, again checking our opacity to say 10 and our flow to 100. And you can just alt select different parts of the skin, alt select. As you can see, it's just brightening up here, and just keep brushing it in, sampling away. There's so many ways, guys. Don't be tied down to one method. It's whatever you need to do to smooth out the skin. So brushing, stamp tool, or lasso. Personally, I like to use the lasso tool, but that's an example of a non-destructive method. So now we're finished with the face. We'll continue down to the neck region, and again we're going to press L for lasso. This part here we can actually do is a one big chunk. There's not much happening down here, and it's not as important. So we'll just apply the blur a few times. And hair, you don't want to try and get too much of the hair. If you can avoid it, do so. And we'll do that. So there you are. So that's the skin all smoothened out. So already it's looking a lot better. Now we're going to move over to the skin layer. Now I like to keep both on, otherwise if you switch off the low it looks very hard edged, and there's a reason for that, because of the linear light and it's the high frequency layer, which pulls out all the details of the skin. Now for this one you're going to want to use the healing brush exclusively. Make sure we've got current layer and not current and below, otherwise it's going to sample from the tonal regions or the low frequency. So we're on high frequency layer, we've selected our healing brush, we're going to select a nice soft brush, not too hard, not too soft. I like to go about 70, and we're just gonna start alt selecting or option select and get rid of the blemishes. Now as you can see, the skin we're retaining all the skin information, but not. See, in the old days we'd lose almost everything of the skin, and we'd have to add in fake skin or take clones from the original face. Here we've retained it thanks to the frequency separation technique. We've not lost any of that detail, we've actually retained it. So I'm option selecting and just going to randomly click around, cleaning up all the little blemishes on the skin. Anywhere maybe my brush is a little too big. After this, please do leave comments. This will be going on YouTube, so feel free to leave any comments if you're not sure of any steps, or if I'm going too quick or something you don't understand. I'm more than happy to answer your questions. Right, so we're gonna keep doing this. Now for the lips, they look okay. This is purely for skin texture. All blemishes, anything we feel like it's not there, try to sample. I'm option clicking or alt click on PC. Try to sample from around the region you want to remove, so around here. And now things like freckles, make sure if you're doing this for a client that you ask them, is there any particular features that you don't wish to remove or you'd like to keep, as sometimes birthmarks are dear to a customer and they would opt or prefer that you retain that. If this is going on for a cover of a magazine, of course they're going to ask you to remove it. In this particular instance here, this is just a tutorial. I'm trying to do my best to cover all bases. I'm almost happy with this. Oh, sorry, that's a classic example of sampling from a region which is not close to what you need to replace. and we've amended that now. Generally, she hasn't got any crow's feet, usually around this region here. It seems to be okay. Under the eyes is always a important one. Again, I'm using the healing brush, soft to hard, so about 50% hardness. Nothing in real life is actually full soft or full hard. So these little blemishes or parts of the skin I will clean up. These are because of the catch or the light from the flash of the camera and the imperfections. It's caught a lot of the generally around the forehead area is where you would get most of the bumps. So we'll try to clean these up as much as we can, and there we have it. That's really all there is to the frequency separation. I mean, with those loose hairs, you might want to replace that. Making sure that we sample from around the area. I'm just removing the hairs. Try to be random so you don't find any distinctive pattern as you can see here. So I hope this is of some value to you people. I will be doing some more tutorials, Photoshop, in the near future. The next tutorial will be based on basic photo manipulation, so merging one or two photos, or two or three photos I should say, into each other. I'll also be doing some Cinema 4D for anyone out there who's interested in Cinema 4D or 3D designing, and I will also be commencing some jQuery, JavaScript, CSS and HTML tutorials. We'll hopefully start with beginner, intermediate and advanced. So I'm just going over, it's much of the same. The healing brush, current layer, a 70% hardness brush, 15 pixels, Alt for PC or Option click on Mac, and literally replacing the follicles, cleaning things up, using the spacebar to move around. So Command or Control 0 to return back to the original. I'm going to save that now. Good idea to save. I'm going to hide this layer and show you the end result, and then we're going to do one final dodge and burn just to tidy things up. So this is the before and that's the after. Again, the beauty of this exercise or tutorial I shouldn't say exercise, the beauty of frequency separation is that I was able to retain the entire texture of the face, fix up the tonal regions so all the tones are the same. If you look at the before, if you see the skin, it's almost not much difference, but it's cleaned up. I've retained it all. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to add a layer on top of this. So we're going to hit Command Shift N for a new layer, or Control Shift N. Our mode will be soft light or overlay. In this case I might use overlay. I might switch to soft light. We're going to select fill with overlay neutral color 50% gray. If you don't have this, that's fine. If you don't have this option, because I'm running CC, what you can do is you can Command Shift N for a new layer, hit enter and go to your edit menu, fill 50% gray. It's the exact same thing, and set your blending mode to overlay. I'm going to delete that layer. This is our dodge and burn layer, so we're going to call that, we're going to use dodge burn. The reason for 50% gray is that it is the neutral color to use whenever you're doing dodge and burn or a lot of the editing. You don't want to use white, you can't use black. So we're just going to now highlight or re-highlight the regions on her face. So by looking at the original photo, we know that the highlights are here, the top of the nose, the cheeks, just around here, the chin, and just around there. So I'm going to switch off the frequency separation group so you can actually observe the highlights: the forehead, the nose, under the eyes, cheeks, and chin. So we're going to reciprocate that. So we're going to start off with the forehead, making sure that I like to always use midtones. I never use shadows and highlights. And my apology, exposure should be about 5%. So we're just gonna paint the highlights. I'll switch off to show you. It's just subtle. Actually, I maybe went a little bit too much there. Gonna use a little bit less. So I'll just paint in a few little highlights there. Now under the eyes, just around here, the cheeks, a little bit of the lips, the chin, and just around here. Okay, that's all there is to it. And next is our burn tool. Right click, soft brush. I tend to use the soft brushes for this exercise. Again, just under the eye a little, just under the eye. We can switch off the frequency separation group to aid us in detecting where the highlights and shadows are. So around the cheeks, this is how you get blush. And just under there, definitely under the nose. If we switch off there, you see just here. And under the chin is another place that we need to do. We'll save. I'll take a step back. We'll zoom in. Right, so I'll zoom in here. I tend to highlight the eyes as well, so we'll dodge that and run this on the other side, and there we are. Let's take a step back. We'll have one final look. We'll put the dodge and burn layer into the group, highlight that. So as you can see, not much difference between that and that. Although in this particular instance here, in my original one, I did a fair more amount of dodging and burning. But you can see it's just the same technique, much of the same. So the dodge and burn layer adds the eyes, lips, cheeks, and then for the final result, we'll hide the frequency separation before and after. And look at the skin, look at the tones. Well, this is another tutorial from Rosetta. My name is Bass. I look forward to doing some more tutorials in the future with you. I hope you've enjoyed this quick tutorial, although it's maybe went a little bit longer than I had hoped. However, I hope you have gained something from this, and please leave any comments in the fields below, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.